internet. Little fact about me, I used to be a werewolf, but I'm alright now. I love werewolves. One of my formative horror experiences when I was still, I think, in single digits was to be gifted Daniel Farson's amazing Hamlin book of horror. It really set a fire in my young brain that has never gone out since. And the image that seared itself most deeply was this glorious picture of a werewolf. I used to stare at this photo, I used to copy it, I used to trace it, and for me it's always been a real shame that there aren't more great werewolf movies. In my humble opinion, or as the kids text these days, IMHO, the greatest werewolf movie ever made is still An American Werewolf in London. That movie is it's over 30 years old now, and it's still the high water mark. Some people say The Howling from the same year. I think American Werewolf just edges it. And since then you can almost count on the fingers of one hand movies that have come close or have just raised the bar some. A Company of Wolves a few years later, 1984, is an amazing werewolf movie. I've got a soft spot for 96's Bad Moon, although it's a little cheesy. I happen to like it. Dog Soldiers from 2002, and I really like the 2010 The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. Sue me, I know it's got its faults, but I happen to really like it. One werewolf movie which is really close to the hearts of an awful lot of people is 2000's Ginger Snaps, which introduced us to Katharine Isabelle. So recently I got a little werewolf itch. You'll find if you watch a lot of these videos that most of the movies I watch tend to come about because I get an itch for something. I want to watch a creature feature, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I've been having a werewolf itch for a few days, and I thought I haven't seen Ginger Snaps for ages, and I don't actually own it. I always thought I'd get round to it, so I decided to order Ginger Snaps and the other two movies and check them out. So it's been 14 years since I've seen it. As I say, I know it's dear to a lot of people's hearts, so I'm convinced it will hold up. But for me tonight, I'm going to eat some chicken that I've just got, and I'm going to watch some Ginger Snaps. We'll be back to report, not on the chicken, but on the movie for you in just a second. Well, goddamn, I had forgotten how damn near perfect Ginger Snaps is. This is Werewolf Story as allegory, as fairy tale. In that regard, it's got a lot in common with A Company of Wolves, and would make a beautiful double feature werewolf movie with A Company of Wolves, which that particular film delves into the Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale and burgeoning sexuality and adolescence and coming of age, but with the werewolf ostensibly as the male sexual threat. Ginger Snaps, all the sexual power in this is from the female. I need to send some props out here for what it's worth. I'm sure they won't see this and I'm sure they won't care, but John Fawcett, who directed it and came up with the story, directs this deftly, with an assured touch, lets the characters live and breathe, lets the scenes play out, lets the dynamic between all the characters play out. There's no shock factor for shock's sake, there's no schlock. All the horror is in service of the story. If you want to see it as a straight werewolf story, it works on that level. If you want to see the werewolf aspects as an allegory for something else, it absolutely works on that level. In that way, on the level of an allegory, I think that this movie is on a par with Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which I happen to adore, and which I think works well on the horror level as a Freddy movie, and I think it works beautifully as an allegory for, again, if you want to read it as adolescence or coming of age, in that particular case, I think the horror comes from the fear of your own sexuality and the realisation of finding your own identity and being scared of that. In the case of Ginger Snaps, again, the horror comes from the change from childhood to adulthood, the power that comes with that sexuality, and the downside to all of that as well. At the heart of this story, it's a relationship between two sisters, Bridget, who's slightly Ginger, who's slightly older, and Bridget, and they drift apart because Ginger's growing up. Boys are noticing her, she's noticing boys. The relationship becomes fractured and fractious. Some minor shout outs. Chris Lemche, I guess is how you pronounce it. He's the male lead, he's the largest male part. He's superb in this. Mimi Rogers is wonderful as the mother, delivering some just the right amount of comedy and dark comic touches. There's nice spatterings of comedy throughout this to just leaven the bread, as it were. The comedy is so perfectly judged and is so tonally perfect to the story they want to tell. Mimi Rogers is amazing. Katharine Isabelle as Ginger, who's going through the transformation, gives a tour de force performance. She's absolutely superb. No wonder she was marked for stardom and has proved that to be the case. I know she's a genre darling, but she's superb. But the movie, for me, absolutely belongs to Emily Perkins, who played the younger sister, Bridget. It's her movie up and down and left and right. Whilst Katharine Isabelle has the showier stuff to do the transformation stuff, Emily Perkins is the heart and absolute soul of this movie, and I'd completely forgotten her contribution, and it's just a joy to watch. In some ways, this movie shares a lot of DNA with the TV series Freaks and Geeks. The movie Heathers, the Christian Slater movie from the 90s, an awful lot of it's about the disaffection of your teenage years. It's about so much stuff, and whilst I was watching it, I thought that the real mark of how excellent this movie is that I could quite happily have sat down and watched a film about these characters if the whole supernatural and horror element had been stripped out and it had just been about these characters' lives. I would happily have sat down and watched a film with these characters and these actors playing out this story without the werewolf element. The werewolf element is handled superbly. It serves the story rather than being the reason for the story. Again, Karen Walton, who wrote the script, man, Diablo Cody, who wrote Juno and later Jennifer's Body. Jennifer's Body doesn't have a patch on this. Diablo Cody wishes she could write something as on the money that speaks so much truth about the young female experience, like I'd know anything about the young female experience. I'm actually, now that I've rewatched this, so eager to get some of my female friends to watch it so I can get their input, because Jennifer's Body by Diablo Cody, which was her horror movie, I don't want to call it a feminist horror movie, but that Jennifer's Body was her horror movie from the woman's perspective. Just seems like it just seems like a set of drawers from IKEA put together, slot A, tab B, compared to this nuanced, wonderfully acted, wonderfully written script. There's blood in there, there's horror in there. This film never does what you expect it to do. Right from the start, given that we're so used to seeing male protagonists in these roles, but it's not just the gender switch that mixes things up. That's just the starting point, because Karen Walton has realised that if you take that as a starting point, you can use the horror as a lens through which you can talk about some very real things: sibling relationships, mothers and daughters, sex, drugs, adolescence, coming of age, love and hate that siblings feel for one another. This is just such a good movie. If you love horror movies, if you love werewolf movies, and you want something that's got a little bit of grist to the mill, it's a little something extra to it, a little spice, a little kick. If you haven't seen Ginger Snaps, you owe it to yourself to check out this movie. I've seen 2 and 3. I don't remember much about them. I can't imagine they'll be as good as this. This movie is perfect in and of itself. It's not crying out to be a franchise or to have sequels. That said, very keen to see part 2, which I remember the least about because it's written by the same screenwriter as this one. I don't think it can be as good, but parts 2 and 3 are going to be a curiosity to me. But how have I stayed away from Ginger Snaps for so long? What the hell was I thinking? It's as close to perfect as a movie can get, as a horror movie can get. I'm probably going to start babbling now. I'm very consciously going to spoil absolutely nothing about this movie on the off chance that anyone's watching this who hasn't seen it. You must see this wonderful film. There is a reason people talk about it in such high regard, and that's because it's fucking brilliant. I'm a happy camper.